will you please welcome Oklahoma State Senator Randy Brogdon.
Good afternoon. I tell you, it's a great opportunity to be with you today. I am more than honored that I have this special privilege of speaking to you. I've only been a Bircher now for about a year. Charlie Meadows, my good friend, sitting back here in the back, sponsored me into this, and I realized for many years that I should have already been a member of the John Birch Society, because the more I read, the more I understood about this society, the more I recognize the fact that I believe in the constitutional privileges that each one of us share. So I told my wife, preparing for this, coming up here to speak, I was a little intimidated because, looking around and, I see Mr. McManus's face everywhere I go, and every time all the tapes that are sent to me in the books, I see him. It's kind of a daunting to stand up here and share with you what's on my mind today. And I told my wife I was just a little intimidated about having to do this today. But my wife, she's sitting back here, and she's always so gracious and helpful. She said, "Hon, you have absolutely nothing to worry about." She's heard me speak a million times, and she said, "Every time I hear you speak in front of a group, you just do magnificently well. You do great. You have nothing to worry about." So then, as oftentimes wives do, she proceeded to give me some advice. She said, "Hon, just remember, when you're up there speaking, don't try and be funny or act intelligent. Just be yourself." So I guess that was helpful. I'm not sure. I think it was Clark Curry that invited me the first. Are you the one that asked me to speak here first, or was it? I forget who it was.
Mr. McManus.
Mr. McManus, well, thank you for the invitation, but then someone followed up on it, and I don't know if it was Clark or somebody, but I got a call, and after I accepted it, a kind of a strange call, and they asked if I believed in the Constitution, and I said, well, certainly. And I thought maybe it was because they recognized that I was a brand new Birch member, and then it was followed up by another kind of strange question. They asked if I believed in the First Amendment and the right of free speech. And I said, well, sure. And they said, well, good, we want you to give us one. So, so this is free. You get what you pay for, so don't be too disappointed by the time I'm through here. But I'm honored to be with you today. Thank you again for the invitation. And I want to talk about a couple of issues that are extremely important to me. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir today. I recognize that fact. But a couple issues that I want to share what's on my heart, primarily because I recognize the fact a lot of people are oblivious to what's going on around us. The two things I want to talk about are liberty and sovereignty. A lot of people in our country these days have no idea what's happening with those two issues, liberty and sovereignty. And it concerns me that people are ignorant to this fact. They're totally oblivious. They have no idea what's going on. They just assume that our elected officials are going about doing good and taking care of business, when all the while they are undermining our sovereignty and trying to sell this nation right out from under us. Liberty is power. We can never forget that. Liberty is power. The more liberty we have, I can tell you, the more empowered we are as an individual. But as we give up, and as we relinquish our liberty, whether it be through taxes and regulations, through obligations, through wars, as we give up our liberty, it's the politicians who become more powerful. And that's just upside down of what our founding fathers envisioned for this great country. Thomas Jefferson said that I would rather be exposed to the inconveniences attending to too much liberty than to those attending to too small a degree of it. And I've got to tell you, I believe Jefferson was onto something. I believe he understood. He understood that the power of the people brings about liberty for each one of us. And as people learn to protect their liberty, it's the politician that becomes inconvenienced. And I tell you what, folks, I think it's time that we inconvenience the politicians around this country. Unfortunately, there's a concerted effort, and I've witnessed this firsthand, a concerted effort around this country to diminish our liberty, to take away our freedom. I've seen it firsthand. And it's amazing to me to realize how many laws each year are passed, not just in the Oklahoma State Legislature, but in the Texas State Legislature and around this nation in Congress. How many laws are actually passed specifically to limit our liberty? That's upside down of what our founding fathers set up for us. Last year I was debating a bill on the floor of the Senate, a tax bill. And one of my colleagues made an astounding statement during his debate. He was trying to convince us to vote for his tax increase because he said, quote, "It will help control the behavior of the individual." I like to fell out of my chair. You see, it's not government's role to manipulate your actions and my actions through legislation. Government's role is to protect our freedom and our liberty and to ensure that each one of us has our right amount of justice shared with us. We all remember the famous speech of Patrick Henry when he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." But I like the first part of that speech. He asked a question. He says, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains of slavery?" Well, the answer to that is no. See, we can only live a sweet, endearing life when we remain a free people. You take our freedom away, you take our liberty away, and life is no longer sweet. The second thing I want to mention very briefly is sovereignty. And I want to hit 2 points on sovereignty, our nation's sovereignty and our state sovereignty. We were talking about this in the car on the way up here. It's almost given that the 10th Amendment, our state sovereignty, states' rights, are almost totally ignored by Congress today. Totally ignored. James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers number 62, he said, "A good government implies 2 things. First, fidelity to the object of government, which is the happiness of the people. And secondly, the means by which that object can best be attained." Well, the object of good government is clearly defined in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, how do we attain good government? How do we secure good government? It's in the very next sentence of that declaration. We attain good government. We secure these rights. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Do you realize that nothing can happen in government without your consent and without mine? We have to allow the political leaders of this country and of our states, we have to give them the authority, because all the authority lies in our hands. We've got to make sure we understand that and get that power back in our hands where it belongs. Freedom and liberty and sovereignty, if we don't continue to secure these rights, those are just going to be things that we read about in the history books. It's not the truths that you and I have the ability to live day to day as we do now. I tell you, I'm concerned about our future. I'm concerned about our kids and our grandkids. What kind of future are we going to leave them? It is our responsibility, just like the ones that have come before us, to make sure that we once again secure the rights and the freedom of liberty and justice for all for the next generation. I want to give you a definition of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the belief that the state is created and therefore subject to the will of its people, who are the source of all political power. That's you. That's me. A sovereign nation like the United States is the supreme lawmaking authority. Congress answers to no other governing authority around this world. The courts answer to no other jurisdiction, no other courts around this world. The president is subservient to no other world leader. We are a sovereign nation. We answer to no one except you, the people. Government answers to no one except to the people of this great nation. But we got a problem. That truth is being ignored. We see courts, politicians, and even the president violating their oath, violating the sovereignty of this nation today. It's commonplace for judicial activists in states around the country, even in our own Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. We see quoting precedents of foreign nations, citing court decisions of foreign courts to justify their lousy decisions that they make. We see politicians making laws that are in absolute direct conflict with the Constitution. Even President Bush, we've seen that he is more than willing to overstep his executive authority when it comes to trade policy. We've talked about the North American Union, the SPP, NASCO, the NAFTA superhighway. But you know what? Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and within the states. Not the president. Only Congress has that authority. Yet President Bush has entered into an agreement with Mexico and Canada that has already been mentioned here today. The SPP, the Security and Prosperity Partnership Agreement, which, by the way, when you read that agreement, at the very top of it, and President Bush has said this himself, it, quote, eliminates our trade and security borders. That's not good for America, folks. No way you cut it, no way you slice it. When you eliminate our security borders, that is not a good thing for America. Sovereignty meant something to our founding fathers. But today, I'm afraid, because of political correctness, apathy, or even worse, just sheer ignorance, our sovereignty is at dire risk in this country. Not only is it being ignored by Washington insiders, politicians, bureaucrats, and judges, it is also being undermined from external forces as well. Organizations like the United Nations, the CFR. Let me remind you that this nation's sovereignty is subject to no one at any time. We are a sovereign nation. Finally, I want to talk about states' rights just for a moment. Our beloved Constitution set up this outstanding Republican form of government, and it gives the rights to the state. The 10th Amendment said the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. In other words, the individual states are actually more powerful than Congress. The individual states are more powerful than judges. The states, the people within the states, are more powerful than the president. How in the world could I make that kind of a statement? I didn't. The Constitution did. You see, the Constitution said that Congress's rights are limited. You know, Congress has the right and the ability to wage war, to coin money, to declare, to maintain a navy, to regulate commerce, very specific things that Congress can do. Anything not listed specifically for Congress is left to the state of Oklahoma to decide, is left to the state of Texas to decide, is left to the individual states. States have almost unlimited power in scope. I asked this question here a while back. I have been asked the question, how is it that we have gotten so far off track? It is a long way that we have come from where the founding fathers set us off on this course, this great experiment called the United States. How is it we have ignored the 10th Amendment? How is it that we have gotten so far off track? And I had to answer that question by saying, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know really how we have gotten to this point that we find ourselves in today. But I do have an answer on how to correct the problem, and it is a simple one. I want you to know something. If we want to correct the problems that we're facing in this country today, we have to do one thing. We need to elect people to office who believe in and respect the Constitution. That's it. It's that simple. And when we find elected officials who stand up there and take that oath, and we put our faith and trust in them, and they violate the oath, vote them out. Get rid of them. Throw the bums out. That's where they belong. They do not need to be. They do not belong anywhere serving any of us if they cannot uphold the Constitution that they swore an oath to. I want to talk very briefly about the legislation about NASCO, about the NAFTA superhighway. Just real quickly, I've got so much to say and too short a time to give you very much of the details, but we had a piece of legislation come before us this year that when you read it, it was relatively benign. It didn't seem like it was much, but we had some people in Tulsa, OK Safe, some friends that are here today that brought this to our attention, and it had a devastating effect to the sovereignty of the state of Oklahoma. And I mean absolutely devastating. And all session long, we fought this bill. And I tried to get my colleague to pull the bill, to not run it. But it had the effects of opening up the NAFTA superhighway and allowing us to participate, and that was the language in the bill, to participate in a federal pilot project that was, quote, unlimited in scope. Well, knowing what's been going on down here in Texas, we perked up when we saw that. The bill started out as a simple resurfaced transportation bill down in a little county in southeast Oklahoma. But new language was put in this bill for us to participate in this pilot project. Now, for us to do that, we had to give up something. You know what we had to give up? Our 11th Amendment rights. Now, if you don't remember what the 11th Amendment is, and I'll be honest with you, at the time I didn't. I just pulled my little Constitution out and I looked at to see what the 11th Amendment was. The 11th Amendment's about that long. It provides a layer of protection to the states to prevent us from being sued in federal court by a foreign nation. Now, this was part of the federal ICE-T program, the federal transportation program. And I'm afraid Texas gave up your 11th Amendment rights. You must have, or you would not be participating in this. I've talked to several of your legislators over the last couple of months, and I haven't heard back to see if in fact you did, but I bet you did. I was not able to convince my colleague in the Senate to pull the bill. He presented the bill after a couple of months. He sits right behind me on the Senate floor. And I was feeding him as much material as I possibly could to convince him to pull that bill. For 2 hours in my office behind closed doors, I debated 4 of ODOT's people that run ODOT, including their staff attorney, on the 11th Amendment. And I'm not an attorney, I'm a heating and air conditioning guy. But to give up those rights, it was pretty obvious to me that could not be a good deal for the state of Oklahoma. Make a long story short, the day finally came to run the bill. My colleague presented the bill, and when they introduced him, he stood up, and I leaned back in my chair. He sits right behind me. I said, "You better buckle in, cowboy, because you're getting ready to go for a ride." And he panicked somewhat. After he presented the bill, he moved advance. He refused to take questions from me. I was the first one up to ask a question. And he would not recognize me for a question. But I was able to debate the bill, and I'm happy to tell you, after a 45-minute debate, we killed that bill 39-7 in this process. Let me just finish up by telling you that with all the problems that we face, and who did that other PowerPoint? I was depressed too. That was horrible. Yeah, that was horrible. But you know, with all these problems that we're facing, and this group is probably more aware of the problems than any other single group of individuals that I could even imagine. But I'm still excited about the future of this country. I'm still excited about the future of the state of Oklahoma. I'm excited that hopefully Texas is going to stop that NAFTA superhighway. Last speech I gave on this last month, I said, you know, Governor Perry, if the Texas state legislature doesn't stop it, he's going to see the biggest Texas turnaround at the Red River that's ever been built, because it ain't coming across the Red River. But it's easy for me to be encouraged about the future, because it's not just dwelling on the problems that we face, because I reflect on the past and I recognize that patriots for generations have always risen to the occasion. When it was time to protect the sovereignty of this nation, and we are at that time today, ladies and gentlemen, patriots have always stood up to protect us. And that excites me. Voltaire said, as long as the people do not exercise their freedom, those who wish to tyrannize will do so, and will put shackles upon those sleeping men. America, it is time to awaken. We have a story to tell. This group, every one of you, have an obligation to continue to spread the news that we have in front of us. We're in a battle for our nation's sovereignty. And I'm convinced of something. If we forsake our future, if we forget our future, we're going to forsake our heritage. I said that wrong. If we forget our heritage, we're going to forsake our future. Now that does scare me just a little bit, I got to tell you. But it doesn't have to be that way, because here's the good news. And thank goodness for this statement. Our future will not be determined by the politicians. You realize that? Let me say it again. Our future will not be determined by the politicians. Our future lies solely in your hands. We've got to take back America. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Good job.